Hello, and in this video we are going to continue working through some HTML. We are going to work with a starter file here, and then we're going to add in some text of our own, and we are going to add some semantic tags to it. So in this starter file I have a little bit of text for a Black Goose restaurant, and then we're going to add an article about black geese, also known as Canadian geese. So to get started, let's go ahead and look at the code that I've got here, which is not much. So you see, to review, I have my doc type, I have my opening HTML tag, and I'm going to go ahead and add in the language attribute. So language is English, EN for English. Then I have my opening head tag. I have my meta tag, which shows my car set, which just lets the search engine know which keyboard that this was typed with. Then I have my title tag, which is Black Goose Bistro. Then my head tag ends, so we see that that is a nested tag. Here's my head tag, and inside there is metadata, and then my title tag. Then I have my body tag, and inside there I have unstyled text. So by default, when you're working with HTML, if you don't have any tags around it, it will default to being a paragraph style. Now that's not proper semantic markup, that is just how it will default render in the visual editor. So visually I can see that it did assign a font to it, which would be Times New Roman as a default font, but there is no styling, everything just flows together, there's no line breaks, nothing. So let's go ahead and add some of those tags that we want to add around there. So reminder, we're going to put in H1 tag, which is our header 1 level tag. I'm going to wrap that around the Black Goose Bistro. And you see how that changed? That is my heading level 1. Then I'm going to add an H2 tag. And I'm going to wrap that around my subhead, which is the restaurant. And you see how that has rendered. Now I'm just going to copy and paste just for you to visually see. I'm going to end up deleting this, but I'm going to copy this just so you can see all the way down to H3, H4, H5, and H6. There are 6 levels of headings, and you should always go in order. You don't have to have all 6 in your website. Typically you don't, or it's very, if you've got a lot of content you might, but it's you don't want to skip, you don't want to have an H1 and then an H4. That becomes a semantic error. So you can go all the way through H5 and H6. So by default, this is how this will render. So you can see H1 is the biggest, H2, H3, 4, 5, and 6. So they continuously get smaller, always are bold. Now that doesn't mean I can't style my H6 to be larger visually than the H1, but that is poor document markup. You don't want to do that. If it is the biggest and most important, it should be higher semantically. So if you said this is my most important heading level, therefore the largest, most notable, that would always be your H1. Typically that is main headline and then secondary subhead, tertiary subheads, and down that list. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and nix those duplicates for the H2. And then I'm going to wrap a paragraph tag around this first sentence. That Black Goose Bistro, menu, fresh ingredients. There we go. And you see that ends up putting in a line break. You see how this is starting to break this up. Catering, since that's going to be the similar level of the restaurant, that will also be an H2. And now that catering is inside the H2 tag, I'll put in another paragraph tag. You will have fun. Cut, paste that right down there. and location and hours. I'm going to make that an H2 as well. And I'm going to wrap a paragraph tag around the rest of this. And you see how just by adding these basic tags around everything that it's already started to stylize and break up this content. So to go back, what my screen reader will read, what a search engine will read, I can end up skipping heading levels if I was using a screen reader. So it would tell me I have one heading level 1 and I have 3 heading level 2. So if I wanted to skip to location and hours, I actually could using a screen reader. But I have the restaurant, then I have catering, then I have location and hours as secondary levels, and then these are treated as a general paragraph tag. So now that I have this done, I'm going to go ahead and copy paste in my article. So I'm going to open up my Word document, and this is just an article that I've taken right out of Wikipedia. But we're going to use this as an example of showing how to mark up a couple different types of content, primarily an article using a sidebar, and we'll also bring in some list types, table, figure, figure caption. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this. And after this ending paragraph tag here, but before my body tag closes, because I do want it to visually render on the page, so it still needs to be within the body tag, I'm going to go ahead and paste in all that copy. And we see that kind of did what we had before, where I just have a lot of text just all smushed together, because again, when nothing is styled, there's no spaces, no carriage returns, nothing like that. It all just smushes. So our job is to go back in and put in some of these headlines and things like that. So I know from looking through my article, and this is where as a designer, if you are given an article, typically you're going to have to read it and figure out how to break apart that content. So that way it's not just this big wall of ugly text. If I just keep sizing this, it's just going to go for like a long time, and that's gross. Nobody wants to read that. So we need to break that apart. So I'm going to go ahead and use the title of this article, and I'm going to make that another H1. It's a high level because it would be the title of the article, so I'll put that in H1. And then I'm going to put my from Wikipedia, so that citation in there. I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to put that in a paragraph tag right now. I'm going to do a little bit more with that in a little bit. And rather than wrapping the paragraph tag around more things, because again, that was the citation, the from Wikipedia, then the first sentence is that the black geese, I'll put a new paragraph tag around that just to separate that from that other citation. That goes on forever. We'll just pop that right down there. There we go. And then taxonomy is going to go ahead and be an H2. And then another paragraph tag to start off, and that's going to wrap around. And then I have what's going to become my sidebar information here. I'm going to go ahead and wrap a paragraph tag around that, but I'm going to style that up again in just a moment, just to add more semantics to it. So we'll just wrap that just to ensure that everything is properly has a tag around it, and then we'll take a look at what we've got here. All right, so that styled this up a little bit. I've got one big chunk here. I have my article information, the title of it, a subhead, and then this is going to be a little down here, a little sidebar, because we can see that that's breaking up, but I need to style it. So now I'm going to go and add a couple more semantic tags to go around my article here. So the first thing I want to add is after the end of talking about this restaurant, I want to add an article tag around this bigger chunk of my article. So the article tag is used for anything that can be considered a standalone article. So this is used often in scientific publications or sites like news sites, blog sites, anything that is going to reference an article. So I'm just going to create an article tag, and I'm going to wrap that around everything but my last little bit here, which would be down here, because I want to use that as a sidebar. So I'll wrap the article tag, and you can see that lights up if I click on that, that's going to light up. All of this is within my article tag. Now I want to adjust this paragraph tag, and I'm going to actually I'm going to turn it into a citation tag. So I'm going to change that to be cite, and then end cite. So now that becomes a citation tag. So that lets my search engine know that this is a citation, and ideally I would hyperlink this back to the original site that I got that from. We're not going to do that right now, but we will do it in a little bit here. So now that I've got my article tag wrapped around here to highlight just that article, I want to wrap an aside tag around all of this. So I'm going to create a new aside tag. And what that is ideally used for is a sidebar. And now this entire little bit down here has become my sidebar. Now it doesn't really look like that. I want to actually style this sidebar to look a little bit more like a list. So when I style this as a list, I'm going to style it several different ways in subsequent videos just to show you different ways you can present that information. So in this video, I'm going to simply put in some line breaks, and then on another one we're going to look at this as an ordered list and an unordered list, and then in a future one as a table, just to design some of this information. So right now I'm just going to do some basic line breaks and then break it up with using an italic tag. So if you remember from previous videos, to put in if I put in a carriage return, you can see this text here under domain. Even if I just hit the enter key, nothing is happening visually. So I need to put in that break tag, which is just BR. And now you can see that that put in a line break. And I'm going to go ahead and copy paste that just for speed after each of these. So that way what visually renders matches more of what I have pasted in here. And now you can see that that matches a little bit better. So I want to call out and make these little parts where I'm calling out kingdom, phylum, class. I want to make those italic so that way they look a little bit different. So to make something italic, it's simply an I tag. And then the I tag will wrap around any of your words. Whoops, I happened to cut that wrong. No problem. There we go. And you see that that made the word domain. Whoops, I've got to put in a break tag. I'm going to go ahead and put that in right here. There we go. And that made that italic. So domain is italic. I want to do the same thing wrapped around each of these words, but I want to show you a slightly different way to italicize something, and that is with the emphasis tag, which is simply EM. So I'm going to wrap around the EM tag around the word kingdom. And notice that while these are two different tags, italic and EM, they look visually the same. So what is the difference semantically? Well, semantically, if I use an italicized tag, that simply italicizes the type. The emphasis tag will read back when someone is using a screen reader, will actually read those words with emphasis. So therefore, it's important to know if you want something to be italicized visually only, you would use an italic tag. If you want to add visual emphasis, or you want to add emphasis when it's read, so if this is being read to somebody, you would use the EM tag. That is an accessibility feature, and it's important to know the difference and experience it with a screen reader to make sure that your information is reading back correctly. For me, this is more of a visual thing than an emphasis thing, so I'm going to just put the I tag around everything. But that's important to remember. Stick it in your brain, the italic tag versus the emphasis tag, and when you would use one over the other. All right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap the I tag around all of these items. And so now I've got the italics wrapped around everything. You can see that I have an italic tag for everything that is italicized, and you can see that stylized over here. So now let's look at the difference between a bold and a strong tag. So if I want to bold something within my text, I can simply use the B tag. So if I want to bold this naturalist name's Giovanni Antonio Scopoli, I'm going to go with that. I can just wrap a B tag around that. And right in line, you see that that has bolded the name. Looks great. So something that also works the same as in a similar manner as the italic tag and the emphasis tag is the bold tag and the strong tag. So if I wanted to put a strong tag around the word Wikipedia here, you see that that bolds that. Since this was already italicized, it is now in bold italics, so it has, you have that kind of cascading style there, but it bolded that. Visually, to somebody, that they're going to look the same. So a strong tag and a bold tag are visually just going to bold those words. The difference again is that a strong tag is going to strongly emphasize the word when it is read back using a screen reader technology, as opposed to the bold tag is only going to visually bold the word. So again, when you're using these tags, you want to choose whether or not that word should be emphasized when read back to the reader. And if you want it to be emphasized when read, you want to use the strong tag. If it's simply for visuals only, you want the thicker, heavier font, you would use the bold tag. So I'm going to go ahead and eliminate that strong tag right now. It's not exactly what I want stylistically. I just wanted to show you the difference there. All right. And so now we've got some decent styling in here. We're getting to see this is looking a little more interesting. But let's go ahead and actually treat our aside as an actual aside. So up into my head tag up here, I need to work and add my style tag. So I'm going to add some in-document CSS styling. So I'm going to create a style tag. And inside that style tag, I need to call out my tags that I've got down here. So the first one I'm going to call out is that article tag. So I can simply type, because that's a tag, I can simply just write the word article, squiggly braces, open those up, and I want the article to float to the left side of the screen, and I want that aside to sit on the right side as a right side sidebar. So in order to do that, I'm going to use what's called a float property, which simply just means when this is able to, this section or this tag and everything inside of it is going to go to the left side of the browser window. So I'm going to say float left. And visually not much happens right now, and that's because it already by default kind of floats to the left. But until I set a width to this, it's going to take up 100% of the width. So I'm going to work on that in just a second, but so after the squiggly braces end for article, because I don't want to be writing for the article, I'm now going to write a new rule for my aside tag. So I'm going to write in aside, squiggly braces, open those up, and I want that to float to the right. And visually, you can see that that's starting to push over. So as I have space, you can see that that's floating to the right. So that is working as it should. The problem is that's not really floating up, and that's because all of these blocks above it take up 100% of that width. So it can't sit side by side because until you define it otherwise, your content will go 100% of the width. So you can set a set pixel dimension for how wide or how many pixels you want your tag to go, but it's better in working for responsive web to think about using percentages. So if I said, all right, I'm going to use a grid, a column grid where I'm going to have 3 columns showing on my page, where maybe my article would take up 2 columns or 2/3 of the window, my aside will take up 1/3 of the browser window. So if I'm thinking of that, then I can think of my basic measurements where if I want something to be 2/3, it should be 66%. So I'm going to set the width of my article to be 66%. And now you see that it's not going to take up this third of my browser window. And so then I want that aside to take up the remaining third. So I'm going to set the width of that to being 33%. If those add up to more than 100, it will automatically float down. So if I said this needs to take up 50 and 66%, that's more than 100%. It will not float up and sit side by side. So right now they add up to being 99%. And now I can see that my aside is sitting nicely here next to my article tag. Here is my article tag, and here is my aside. And now I have them sitting side by side, and they're going to respond as that window responds, and always taking up 66% and 33%, which is approximately 2/3 and 1/3 of that browser window. So now I'm going to add a couple more details to this document. And what I want to do is I want to add a little figure and then a figure caption to go in my aside here. So I have some text that refers to an image. So Canadian goose swimming in the park. I'm not going to use this specific picture, but that text calls for an image. So I've removed the paragraph tags that go around it, but I want to note that I moved, so there should still be a paragraph tag wrapping around this list down here. So I have a paragraph tag beginning and ending here. I currently have nothing around here because that's going to turn into a figure caption. So to bring in a figure and a figure caption, I'm going to first start with the tag of figure. And the figures are often used for things like charts, data. Oftentimes it's not necessarily used with an image, but if you had an article where you have an image and a caption that needs to go with it, you know, figure 1, figure 2, figure 3, that would be when you would use something like this. So I'm going to have the figure tags start and end, and then I'm going to link that image. So I'm going to create img src for my source, and then I'm going to link it to this blackgoose.png. And now I can see that picture is in there, and it is labeled as a figure. Now, still within this figure tag, if I want my text to become a fig caption, it needs to reside inside, nested in that figure. So I'm going to take that text and I'm going to cut it. I'm going to place it in here, and then I'm going to wrap the fig caption tag around it. So that is just fig caption. And that is going to wrap around that text. And what that semantically does is it ties the caption for an image with that figure. So if you're doing charts, graphs, things of that nature that you would call figure 1, figure 2, this isn't necessarily the best picture of a figure, but we're using it more for learning purposes here. That would be how you would showcase a figure with its caption. So now we see that that ties in, so that this text is now tied to that image. So it semantically goes with that figure. And now you can see how that is appearing, and that looks pretty good. So I've got my figure and my fig caption to go with it. So I'm going to wrap up with a little bit more styling on this page. And what I want to do is kind of break up visually some of my sections. So this top bit is about my restaurant, and then I have my article down here. So I want to visually break that up so you see there's a difference in content. So I'm going to use what's called a horizontal rule tag, which is super easy and fun. So in between the end of this paragraph, let me scooch that down a little bit. End of this paragraph where my hours are, and before the beginning of that article tag, I'm just going to create a horizontal rule, which is just HR. And much like the break tag, it's just by itself like that. So, and you see that that's going to give me a solitary black line, so that visually breaks up the top and bottom of this. And I think that looks kind of nice. So I want to style that a little bit. So I'm going to come up into my document style sheet up here, and I'm just going to type in for the HR, squiggly braces, open it up, and I'm going to give it a border of solid to make a solid line. I'm going to say 1 pixel, and then I'm going to make it orange to kind of match my goose picture there. And you can see that that styled that. So again, much like in my previous videos, if you want to style that line, you can make it dotted or dashed. You can make it thicker. You can make it any color that you would like. We're just drawing off of some of the predetermined swatches here. Now I want to put a line in between my article and then my aside. So I'm going to do that with a border right on my article. So if I've got my article tag here, if I just put a border right down the side and not have border all the way around the box, it'll give me that visual rule. So I'm going to type in within my article CSS, I'm going to type in border, and then I want it to be border right, so it's not going all the way around, it's just a line down the right side. And I'm going to type in solid, and I'm going to make it 2 pixels orange. And there, that breaks that up. I have a visual here. Now you notice when I put that in, visually these become very tight. It's important anytime you're working to ensure that you have proper margins and padding. Everything is getting kind of really smudged in together. So this is going to run right up until that border on either side. And I want to give that a little more space. So I'm going to set some padding all the way around on my article tag. So I'm just going to type in padding and then 15 pixels, and that'll put 15 pixels of padding all the way around. You see how that scooted that in, and I like that better, and then it's not touching this side. But oh no, we have a problem. That shoved my aside down, and the reason is when I added that extra, it's now surpassing 100% of that width, which by default will push it down. So it's always going to float down. I don't want that, so I need to go back and adjust my percentages. So I can either take down the 33 or the 66 percentage-wise to ensure that that's floating back. So I'm going to take this down to 63%, and that's still not quite doing it. So let's take this down to being 30%. And there we go. That's giving it enough space so that, and now they're floating side by side. And I've got that extra space on that. And so that gives me a little bit of extra wiggle room. There's a little bit more visual breathing room. And I can now define that I have a chunk here visually, and I've got a chunk down here and a chunk to the side. So that's styled that up and has broken up this information a little bit more for the viewers. So you think of where we started, where it was just a big wall of text, to now we've got visual breaks. I can more easily see and read this information. It becomes a lot more digestible to the readers. So we're going to keep working on this in future videos, but for right now, thank you for watching, and we will see you on the next one.